to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today's webinar is regarding onboarding optimization and increasing signups with revenue boosting identity verification techniques. All right, well with that, let's jump into some quick introductions. My name is Ryan Alexander. I'm Vice President of Product here at Prove, with a focus on identity verification and fraud prevention. I have over 20 years experience in financial services with 14 plus years in product management, fraud prevention, identity, and authentication. I've managed fraud prevention for digital account open at Washington Mutual, Chase, Wells Fargo before moving into product. And prior to joining Prove, my team at Wells Fargo operationalized the use of phone intelligence to secure financial transactions and enable customer onboarding. And lastly, back in 2009, I spoke at Information on Demand about using link analysis to mitigate fraud. And I've used multiple issued patents as well as publications. And I'm also joined with Sunil Madhu, who is founder and CEO of Instant. Welcome today, Sunil. He joins us from Instant, and Instant is the world's first fully managed customer onboarding service for businesses. He's a serial entrepreneur and a top 100 fintech influencer who has spent over 20 years innovating solutions in the security, identity, and access management, and governance, risk, and compliance industries. Most recently, he was founder and CEO of Secure, now a $1.3 billion fraud business. Sunil left Secure in 2019, after growing that business to a repeatable scale to start Instant. Thank you for joining me today, Sunil. And
thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yep, absolutely. Glad to have you today. Prove enables commerce and secures transactions with our global proprietary phone identity cloud. Our goal is to empower businesses to thrive in the digital economy. Our phone identity cloud is purpose-built to modernize the way consumers prove who they are with ease, accuracy, and privacy, which in turn maximizes approval rates. Mobile phones have become the master keys to the digital life. And mobile phones are the fastest growing technology in history, with 98% of the developed world and 67% of the planet now having a mobile phone. Mobile phones are also unique in that they are always with us, seamlessly bridge the online and offline world, and have built-in identity and encryption. Digital businesses have quickly adopted phone numbers as the primary way to identify and engage consumers. And lastly, Prove has a broad set of capabilities that enable consumers to prove their identity with their phone instantaneously and seamlessly. Prove can be integrated into traditional onboarding flows where consumers input their data, to completely transforming and streamlining the onboarding experience, resulting in consumer delight. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But first, I'd like to hand it over to Sunil to introduce Instant.
Thanks, Ryan. Instant's the first fully managed service for digital customer onboarding for businesses. Basically, as the name suggests, we take care of the entire technology stack and the orchestration, the business logic, the training and prevention of fraud using an AI. Uniquely, we're one of the only solutions that fully warranties a solution. So we only get paid when businesses are able to accept more good customers. And at the same time, we help businesses shift up to $100 million of fraud loss liability off their balance sheet onto our business.
So I wanted to jump into a little bit of the problem of what we're facing today, and then we'll jump into fraud after that. So the challenge with onboarding is that 97% of consumers choose businesses that have a smooth, easy experience. Customer experience is paramount, is what that's saying. Also, 40% of people abandon their application, and it's even worse if you start the application on a mobile phone. almost half did not complete due to a poor customer experience or a confusing fraud process. These are critical stats because if you don't get it right, consumers will not choose your business. And I want to jump into fraud now. And there are many different types of fraud. And Sunil, I'll walk through some of these and get your thoughts on and experiences on these as well. Love to hear your thoughts. Different industries are hit harder by different types of fraud. Even different types of products within the industry are hit differently. For example, third-party fraud or identity theft, as it's more commonly known, is a very common fraud type in the digital economy. And in my opinion, exists because there traditionally has not been a strong way to authenticate prospects. Going back many years, KBAs were invented to verify prospects, and it worked for a period of time, but some companies are still using it today. Data breaches have exposed the weakness of leveraging knowledge-based authentication to authenticate prospects. But mobile phones are now much more prevalent, and these are a better way to verify identities. And companies have already begun to migrate to this better method. Synthetic identity fraud is also one of the fastest growing types of fraud in the account opening space. And it costs banks roughly $6 billion annually, because identification in the United States relies heavily on static PII, or personally identifiable information, including Social Security numbers, according to the Federal Reserve. Also, synthetic fraud is often underreported, as it is difficult to identify and track because there's really no person behind this fake identity claiming loss or abuse. And lastly, chargeback fraud is the largest fraud segment in the online e-commerce, responsible for trillions of dollars in global fraud losses. Chargebacks occur when a credit card provider demands a retailer to pay them back for fraudulent or disputed transactions. This is ultimately due to a lack of strong identity verification and or authentication for these e-commerce transactions. Sunil, what are your thoughts and experiences on these different types of fraud?
Ryan, like you stated, these are very common. The lending industry primarily loses 10%, according to the Fed, for every loan issued in the United States to first-party fraud. So that's a huge problem. It's largely unsolved because it has to do with the actual consumer providing their real information and choosing to defraud the institution that's lending to them. So that's largely an unsolved problem. But synthetic ID and third-party fraud are prevalent pretty much across all industries and use cases. Additionally, as you stated, e-commerce specifically suffers from chargeback fraud. So these are really the most common types of fraud that most businesses try to combat. As you might imagine, it's very easy with the amount of stolen information about citizens out there on the internet, and with the capabilities to generate completely fake IDs, that these types of fraud are booming.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Sunil. And we actually have a poll that we wanted to ask the audience, and we wanted to get some feedback here. So Terrence, if you could pull up the poll, and we wanted to ask the audience, when it comes to onboarding, what is your top priority? Is it reducing fraud? Is it improving the experience, driving revenue? Is it something else, perhaps compliance, or improving the manual approval process? Improving the customer experience right now is coming in at about 50% roughly, and mitigating account fraud is about 35%. But Terrence, why don't you close the poll and we can share the results? Thank you. Great. So, customer experience is paramount. That is what everyone's saying. And I think that's fraud is a close second, though, which you have to manage fraud, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge always balancing the two, Ryan. Obviously, customers want to get to the product, service, whatever the business is selling to them faster, and they see authentication, authorization, fraud prevention, all of this stuff as barriers to get between them and the product or service they're trying to get to. But at the same time, the business needs to care about those things because it's a big driver for cost and revenue. So trying to strike the right balance with the right set of tools is always a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree. All right, Terrence, let's jump to the next page. So I'm going to go through some slides around proof prefill, and after that, I will turn it over to Sunil for him to go through a couple of slides. So let's dive into proof prefill. So proof prefill is a modern way to authenticate consumers leveraging the phone. Consumers' identities are verified and forms are automatically filled in with the consumer's real data using bank-grade authenticated data. It leverages strong authentication using two factors, and those two factors are something you have, i.e. the phone, and something you know, like a challenge question, for example, like last 4 SSN or birth date. There is 90% coverage on phone numbers, and we don't know of a case where we got the identity wrong. We do a great job of householding. It also makes account opening or customer registration much faster and easier. It's also surprisingly a great fraud mitigator, as bad actors opt out of the prefill process. They prefer to manipulate identities and contact information in order to avoid the true victim being notified. So essentially, you have a large path. Most customers are choosing to prefill, and the least amount of customers are choosing not to prefill, and the fraud is really bucket and funneled into that lower volume bucket, so it's much easier to identify. And the proof prefill is really surprisingly a convergence of fraud reduction and customer experience, which typically are at odds with one another. If you increase the experience, make it really, really easy, fraud usually goes up, right? So you have to balance that. But this is one where it really comes together. Next page, you want to jump to the next page, Terrence? And proof prefill really flips the traditional onboarding on its head. For example, traditional onboarding really asks the consumer to type in all of their information, only to look up that person, validate that information, and then authenticate the consumer to ensure that it's really them applying. This often results in a lower pass rate due to fat fingering and other archaic ways to verify the consumer. Prefill really flips it on its head and really starts with the phone number, authenticates them up front, and then fills in all of that verified information, removing the fat fingering errors and also reducing abandonment from filling out long forms. And I'll let you know how we do that through this new method called Pro. And if you want to jump to the next slide, we have a concept called Pro, and this is how this is our approach to authenticating or verifying consumers. Pro is an acronym really for possession, reputation, and ownership. It's really a three-pronged approach to strong authentication, and the 3 steps are really this. So for possession, this is where it's important to confirm the person is in possession of the device. And this can be done in 2 ways. 1, actively with an SMS text message, or 2, passively with a secure service called mobile authentication. And that really confirms the possession of the phone number passively. It streamlines the experience tremendously. It's great. And it actually reduces the social engineering of the OTP as well. So there's a fraud prevention aspect to that as well. Secondarily, we have reputation, and this step really ensures there's nothing suspicious about the phone number. in that it's not a burner phone. There hasn't been any recent changes in the phone. And that's really our risk assessment and trustworthiness of the phone number. And then lastly is this ownership step, where this really confirms that, in this case, John is the rightful owner of this phone, and that we're sending this text message, for example, to John's phone. So if we simplify this, we put the three methods into a simple statement, it would sound something like this. We'll send a text message to John's phone that hasn't been taken over by a bad actor. So I wanted to show you a little bit how this looks like through the demo. And to preface this demo, thank you for pulling that up, Terrence. To preface this demo, this can be done in a desktop browser, a mobile browser, or a mobile app environment. The experiences may be slightly different, but this one that we're going to demonstrate has a look and feel of a mobile browser or a mobile app. So the consumer navigated to, let's say, First Street Bank, and they wanted to apply for the Diamond card. So go ahead and hit agree here to start the demo. So they're navigating to the page here. They want to apply for this card, and they say, yep, that's the card I want, and they hit apply. So I'll pause here and just go through what just happened. So behind the scenes, mobile authentication ran passively to confirm the phone number of the mobile device that they were using after the apply button was clicked. So this particular demo, this version, is where the customer does not have to enter the phone number. It was passively obtained. Next, the reputation of that phone number was also interrogated to determine there was nothing suspicious about that phone number. Also, it was determined that Prove has identity information behind this phone number and is able to pre-fill. This message, says that here, and you can customize this message, but it also states that now the challenge question is really required before we pre-fill. So let's go ahead and enter the correct last four SSN and hit continue. And voila, their information is pre-filled. So you have name, address, date of birth, SSN, and the phone number here. And that's really it. So the pre-fill is done, and they can go ahead and click apply and get their card all approved. So that's the pre-fill process. And I want to go through a couple of slides. I have two more slides here I want to just run through. So the next page really talks about what fields we can pre-fill. And you saw a couple of them there on that last slide, but we can pre-fill name, address, SSN, date of birth, as well as email address can be pre-filled, and up to 10 addresses or email addresses can be returned. This can work on mobile phones, VoIPs, landlines, with the only exception being that the possession check for a landline would be a voice delivered code to confirm that they're in possession of that, or they're on the other end of that phone. And then there's one slide I wanted to go through. I think this is a really cool concept that I'm excited about. And this is really the QR code that can start a pre-fill process or identity verification process. And the QR code has really increased in popularity due to the increase in contactless commerce as a result of COVID. And how it works is, if you haven't done this before, the mobile phone can scan the QR code. All you have to do is actually pull up if you have an iPhone, you can pull up the camera. And just when you hold the camera over that code, it has a little drop down that pops up, and you click on that and it takes you to a page. And so that will take you to that landing page or an internet web page. And that can really be the start of the pre-fill flow that I just demonstrated. And that can streamline the customer journey in whatever, your company wants to do, or the ideas here are endless, but a couple of them a couple ideas here are, you could have this on a sign in an airport to buy a product. You could have it as a convenient way to identify customers for rewards when tracking orders. Scanning codes at restaurants has been a lot more popular these days to be able to see the menu, and you could identify the name or the address to personalize that order, or even perhaps call out their name when the food order is ready. You could have a QR code while someone is standing in line to know, who's in your store and have a record of it. The nice thing about this functionality is that we can help you identify that person through this QR code, even if they are not your customers. Think of like guest checkout, for example. And by the way, the QR code that you're looking at right now, you can scan it right now to book a demo of the product. So that's actually a working QR code itself. All right. So now that you've seen the benefits of Proof Prefill, I'll turn it over to Sunil and to give a brief overview of instance capabilities as well as the results he's seen using Proof's solutions. Sunil?
Thanks very much, Ryan. Proof's a very valued partner of ours, and we've integrated Proof into Instance platform. As I stated earlier, Instance is kind of a different solution in this market. We're offering a fully managed customer onboarding service for businesses. We believe that a lot of businesses shouldn't be wasting time spending money on integrating, orchestrating different vendors, writing business rules, and generally wasting time trying to constantly combat fraud instead of focusing on offering a better product or service experience for their customers. So uniquely, we've decided to offer a fully baked solution. Customers can deploy it with a line of code added to their sign-up pages. Kind of works like Google Analytics. It's very easy to deploy. Once that line of code from Instant is deployed onto an application sign-up pages, either on web apps or mobile apps, Instant essentially manages the entire digital onboarding service for the customer. And that includes making sure that the identities are real, making sure that there's no fraud risk, and at the same time, increasing acceptance of good customers, while offsetting all of the cost and the loss liability for the business. What that means to the business is that they can get their products and services to market faster. They don't have to worry about integrating a bunch of vendors and figuring out what combination of vendors and business rules they write on top of those vendors will end up giving the best performance. They don't have to worry about fraud loss, which is entirely unique to us as well, because we warranty our product. So for every good customer we pass into a business, we provide a guarantee up to $100 million a year for fraud loss coverage. So when fraud happens, we will take the hit, not the business that uses our platform. Because the entire experience with us is seamless, the customer never really directly interacts with us. Our magic happens in the background when the customer tries to sign up. And our model is also unique in that we only charge our customers for performance, so we only get paid when more good customers are pushed through your business than you're able to do today. So these are all unique things about Instant. And what we've done in our technology stack to enable all of this is kind of build out a proprietary pipeline of different types of technology that are typically found in security and risk management, not just personal information comparison, like a lot of vendors tend to do. And we've plugged in Proof because Proof's platform we found has the best accuracy and coverage and feature set in terms of capabilities built around the mobile network and mobile devices, which as Ryan said, is kind of key to everybody. Everyone has a cell phone these days. So if we want to proceed to the next slide, this is kind of how Instant works. On the right-hand side, we built an AI that powers our managed service platform. It has several integrated vendors built into it so that we have capabilities, including Proof's capabilities to introspect into the mobile device and the subscriber information. But we generally essentially allow businesses to sign up. We qualify the businesses that apply to make sure that we're able to take over the loss liability risk. If you're a startup and you don't know what kind of fraud you have because your product hasn't hit the market yet, that's not a problem. You can get a running start with us, and after about 6 months of running with us, when we have a good understanding of the fraud that your application is exposed to, we can enable coverage. But in general, we're able to cover for early stage businesses, say $1 million in losses a year, all the way up to 100 million, depending on the business need. And as I said earlier, deploying our solution is fairly straightforward because it's essentially a line of code that goes onto your existing application sign-up pages, whether that's on web or mobile. We don't really affect your business's user journey. We don't require you to do anything in particular, but our capabilities cover the breadth of the capabilities you can find combining a dozen or more vendors together, all in one platform. Prove powers the whole phone subscriber information core for our engine, so that when we get phone numbers of people, we basically call into Prove to allow Prove to tell us how that, which subscriber owns that phone number, to be able to, as Ryan pointed out, verify possession of the device, the reputation of the device, etc., which we feed into the models that we use to make our overall decision for the customers. That's it. So, this is the kind of unique thing about us, the way we warranty our product. And our partners are able to embed us and offer this to their own customers. And anyone who obviously uses Instant will get this benefit for their business as well. Like I said, for every accepted good customer, Instant warranties that customer for performance. So if a person signs up today because Instant said that person was good, and your business accepted that individual as a result, and say 2 months from now that person goes on to commit some form of fraud because they employed a synthetic ID or a third-party ID, etc., to go about committing that fraud, and we got the answer wrong, we will indemnify your business for the loss. It works pretty much like we're used to doing in the merchant world, in the e-commerce world, where if you use Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, the merchant will cover the loss liability when fraud occurs on behalf of the merchant. The card network will cover the loss on behalf of the merchant. In that same way, we will cover the loss for the customer in new account opening scenarios. Obviously, we have to qualify each customer we sign up. So we ask you a bunch of questions around the nature of your business, the types of products that are being sold, that allow us to make an actuarial decision as to whether we're able to cover the risk or not. I'm happy to say that for 99% of our customers, we're able to cover them. And then depending on the need of your business in terms of how much money you're losing today in fraud, we're able to underwrite the loss all the way up to $100 million a year. And we're able to put our money where our mouth is thanks to partners like Prove that are embedded into our solution that allow us to eliminate over 99% of the fraud that gets into our system. So we'll manage the technology, the model building, the training, and all of the complex work that goes on into creating orchestration stacks and so on, without any human being having to write a single rule or figure out which vendor combinations to make in the industry to enable their risk and compliance stack. Obviously, we allow businesses to offset their fraud risk. At the same time, we allow them to keep ownership of their compliance processes by providing a lot of rich data back to the business in terms of how the individual that was signing up was vetted, in terms of their mobile posture, their psychographic biometric behavior, posture, and their sign-up flow behaviors. Thanks, Ryan.
Excellent. Thank you, Sunil.
So yeah, these are some of the awesome results we've seen with Prove. Prove has given us a pretty deep depth of coverage, which is coverage of the US population. We're also able to confirm that Prove has helped us accept a lot more good users, and these numbers are specifically for Prove relative to other vendors. So Prove's own performance on our data set has been really awesome, and then Prove rejects more potentially risky people as well because of their unique technology. So overall, Proof's been a great partner, and the technology helps us make sure that our own exposure to risk is minimized.
Excellent. Thank you, Sunil. And I wanted to go through a couple of onboarding best practices and mention my thoughts on these. And Sunil, I'll give you a chance to share your thoughts on this as well. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that customer experience rather should take precedence over fraud mitigation, and that was really demonstrated with the poll. The poll had like 48% on the customer experience, over 35% on fraud mitigation. So, I think that's also represented there. Fraud is obviously a close second. You have to care for it very well. But customer experience should take precedence over fraud mitigation, because if you don't have a customer, there's no fraud to manage. And you can always close your doors to business and reduce your fraud to zero, but that's just silly.
It's especially the case today with millennials, who are often very impatient, and if you don't get them through that door all that more quickly, you're going to lose them to some other competitor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, so and minimizing pages and minimizing consumer keystrokes is really important there. Get them through quickly. Avoid jargon, confusing statements. And this one's really a good one. I like this one. It's actually use the right amount of friction. Everyone thinks that it's got to be seamless and streamlined to get the customer through. But some consumers expect some level of friction, especially like if you're applying for a mortgage worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. A consumer expects to go through some level of friction there. So think about the experience that you're giving and what it's worth to the customer, and how quick they should get through the process. And then lastly, once you approve them as a customer, you should issue digital credentials, username and password, or binding their phone or device to that customer profile you just opened, so that the next time they show up, they're able to authenticate and get into the system. You can also immediately grant access to services, whether it be a card, issuing a card to a mobile wallet or something else. But those are really great optimal services. Customers expect to apply, get through the process really quickly, and then start using that product, whatever it is you're selling, or whatever it is you're allowing them to open. So I think those are some good practices. Sunil, do you want to share some additional thoughts on that as well?
No, that's these are all very good practices. I mean, generally speaking, if you do it right and you make sure you've let the right person in, you can then extend that information to the life cycle of that customer. So when they're performing transactions beyond account opening, you have this notion of always on authentication. So you know that the person who established the account is in fact the person that 6 months from that date is performing a transaction. And that assurance allows you to deliver seamless and frictionless experiences to your customers. You don't have to keep re-authenticating them, keep asking them for a lot more information, and so on. So these are all great practices.
Great. So that was really our, I believe, our last slide we wanted to share with you, just some of those onboarding best practices there. We have a few questions here we can answer. And the first one was for myself here. And does pre-fill only work on the mobile phone or in the mobile phone channel? And no, pre-fill is an omni-channel solution and can work really in any channel where the consumer interactions occur. That includes like the mobile app, the mobile web, on a desktop, in a tablet. If you call into a contact center, you could use it there. Those are just a few examples of some of the areas. And then I think the second question was around pre-fill is what is the accuracy of the data? So accuracy is really based upon how often the pre-fill data is changed, and that which is roughly 90%, indicating a 90% accuracy rate. And like I mentioned previously, we don't know of a case where we got the name or SSN wrong. And we have API fact sheets with more detailed information if you want to see those. Let's see here. The third question here is, this is for you, Sunil. Does Instant manage KYC compliance risk and fraud risk?
It's a good question. Yes, we do. It's a short answer. We allow businesses to shift fraud loss liability up to $100 million off their balance sheet onto us. We allow the business at the same time to remain compliant, and we don't rock the boat in that respect. What we do is we provide the business a lot of rich information around how that customer was vetted during the sign-up flow, ranging from their devices, their behavior, geolocation, a lot more, all packaged up so they can remain compliant and satisfy the legal requirements much more easily. I think there's a question that came up as well that says, once the phone is stolen, how can you prevent fraudulent transactions? And I'll let you answer that, Ryan.
Yep, thank you. So this is really where, and when the phone is stolen, that can mean a couple different things. Someone physically took the device itself and stole it. The other thing is
SIM swap.
SIM swap. So that, like, yeah. So there's a couple different stolens. I'll go through that. But if they, for instance, did a SIM swap or an unauthorized port, you would actually take over the phone number. Our Trust Score product is the one that identifies this situation. So this is where I was mentioning where, to make sure that it's not a burner phone or it hasn't been taken over. This is where Trust Score identifies that, you're not sending the text message to that the phone that was just taken over by the fraudster through a SIM swap or an unauthorized port. You would identify that situation and you could prevent that. The other thing is I think the other question side to your question is if the phone is stolen, like physically stolen, they haven't done a SIM swap or a port, they just physically took the device. So how that would work is, yeah, they could get possession of that phone because they physically possess it, but two, it would have to be within a short amount of time because the person would have to, they would identify that phone was missing. And so it would have a short window, number one. Number two is they wouldn't know to pass the challenge question. So this is where that second factor of authentication. So the first factor is something you have. The second factor is something you know. And so they wouldn't be able to pass those, like, what is the last four or even the full SSN. Perhaps you can do full SSN if you'd like, and that could prevent that.
Well, is also who you are. So the biometric behaviors also allow you to figure out if it's someone else that's using the stolen device because the device being held differently or the behavior on that device is different, right? So a combination of all of these things can help. And more importantly, if you lose your cell phone, of all the things you can lose today, right? Most people, if they lose their cell phone, and they can't get the cell phone back, they're calling their network and they're like, "Hey, I lost my phone," right? So the risk in itself is mitigated because cell phones become central to all our lives.
That's a great question. Thank you for the submitter for that one. I have another one here. How is this different from Google's browser autofill? And proof pre-fill is really superior because the pre-filled identities through Prove are actually authenticated, verified data, and where it could actually meet, a bank's CIP requirements that's leveraging like GLBA data sources. Whereas Google autofill is maybe the consumer like typed it into the browser and this is all their legit information. But once they, use Google autofill, the company that gets that information into their form doesn't know that it's verified information, and they're going to have to do their own validation on that entered information. Even though it was auto-filled from Google, they would still have to go through the validation. So Prove, when this information comes through, it comes through as validated information, which is a difference from Google, which is nice. I think we have two more questions here. One for Sunil here. How does instant fraud warranty work? Do you want to explain that real quick?
Sure. We basically qualify each customer using a bunch of criteria questions that we ask them, and based on the qualification, we determine how much, what kind of limits we can apply on the warranty, and then we provide an indemnification built into our contract. There's nothing the customer has to specifically do. When claims happen, there's a process described in the contract as well for claims to be batched up and sent to us for payment. It's pretty straightforward. Ryan, I see questions come in. Is it possible to identify fraud where a customer creates multiple digital identities using a combination of KYC authentication and different email, mobile, etc.? Are there any technologies for identifying a digital identity unification? So I guess the question really is, if the customer provides different types of information to set up multiple identities, could you identify that? So, I mean, I can say, well, on Instant, we definitely can, because we look at things like velocity. So we're able to tell that two different emails from the same IP address or the same names being generated. That's one way to solve for that. Are there any technologies for identifying digital identity unification? Well, there are quite a few. Like I said, anti-resolution, and I'm pretty sure Proof can do this as well. Internally in our systems, we kind of keep linkages to different attributes of different people. And so when people provide, say the same name but different email address, a different physical address, internally the system is able to disintermediate most of that. And in terms of unification, I think we're moving towards a self-sovereign identity world where all of our transaction information, etc., can be decentralized, and everybody's sharing the same decentralized infrastructure or database. And in that case, you have a centralized repository that's replicated everywhere that allows you to unify all of these different sharded identities as well. So that's something that can be accomplished different ways. There's another question there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just want to add a few thoughts, and then we can jump to that next question. So yeah, and Proof has the ability to identify, similar to what you were mentioning, Sunil, is the velocity. We can see that if through all of our Proof clients, if there's velocity of possession attempts that are attempting like on multiple different identities, we can identify that where one phone is being used to or attempted to be used on multiple different identities. We can identify that. Within our Verify product, we've added synthetic identity codes too. So if they're also attempting to use a synthetic identity, for example, we have methods to identify that as well. So I just want to mention those couple things. We move on to that other question here. It says, do you have a need to access the telcos directly to validate whether a phone is connected or not? So we do have that capability today, and but that's not necessarily how we don't need to do that, because through the possession checks, a lot of the time, just by nature of sending these possession checks to a large number of clients, we have visibility that these phones are working, and they're sending text messages validating their identities on a routine basis. So you kind of have this trust heartbeat or that's going on out there with a particular identity. So do we need to access to telcos directly to do this? No, but do we have access to that? Yes, we do. So we can do it in a couple different ways. And I think the second part of this question is, does your mobile authentication process remove that need aside from a landline? So I think if this question is about the service mobile authentication, the actual secure passive authentication possession check. Mobile authentication only works on mobile phones, that passive authentication. So if I'm reading and understanding your question correctly, it would only work on that. And the possession checks through landlines are through those voice delivered one-time passcodes. I don't see any other questions. Sunil, this has been a great time to discuss customer onboarding and optimizing the experience and delving into fraud. It's been a great discussion with you. Any last thoughts you'd like to share before we adjourn as well?
Thanks for being a great partner, Ryan. Always a pleasure working with Proof.
Likewise, it's a pleasure working with you as well, Sunil.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and everyone have a great day.